Hello everyone and welcome to my guide on the racial passives for the Elder Scrolls Online. So I do have a previous guide based on the sort of best class to pick. Definitely check that out. I will try and remember to link it in the description, but if I don't, it should be somewhere on my channel very recently. But this is going to be discussing about the racial choices, and race is a very, very important decision. You can make it wrong and you can make it right. It really is. That's black and white sometimes. I would say it's not life and death if you don't get it wrong. If you truly want to go sort of for the roleplay aspect, for example, a Khajiit looks very good and things like that, you can definitely do that. But I would have to say that, especially from a PvE point of view, well, to be honest, PvP as well, your race is going to be a really important factor for survival, damage, healing, you name it. It's going to be super, super important. So definitely make sure you pay attention to this, especially if you're a newer player. There's a lot in here that I will go through, and yeah, it's going to be a big scoping part for your gaming future. So do make sure that you listen to it carefully. Again, it's going to save you quite a bit of hassle later in the game when you realise, oh shit, I should have picked this race or whatever. And it's a big helper, and perhaps it's even going to make you want to respec to a different race, realising that your current one's dodgy, but who knows. A couple of things to break down first. First of all, do remember that you can only run certain races on certain alliances unless you have the gold edition of the game. So if you don't have that, you can actually purchase it for crowns. There is an option to buy all races, all alliances. I don't know how much it costs. I can't bother checking that because I'm on the PTS. But what I would say is that try and avoid that if you can. It's quite a bit of money. And obviously, if you can pick the right race for you off the bat, it's going to help. In the end, it's going to be about the same as upgrading. So it's not the end of the world if you didn't, but I would say that it's pretty important to make sure you pick the correct race. It's very, very helpful, and it's going to make a big difference. So, first race is the Breton. Certainly one of the most underestimated PvP races in the game. In my opinion, this doesn't get anywhere near the level of credit it deserves. I really think it's a super strong PvP race, and a lot of people underestimate that. Obviously for a Magicka class, by the way. I should point that out. This is a Magicka race for sure. PvE wise, it doesn't shine out quite as much as other races such as Dark Elf and High Elf, but PvP wise, I really do like this race. I think it's severely underestimated, and I'm going to go over the stats and all that and sort of explain to you why I like this race a lot. So first passive, pretty irrelevant. These first passives in your class don't matter too much. They're not really life or death. This is Opportunist, gain light armor, skill line, and increase your AP by 1%. So it's not really changing a lot. Maybe if you're going for EMP, the AP might make a small difference, but don't get excited by it. It's not going to exactly change the future. Second one, increase your Magicka by 10%. Very good racial passive. Imagine this, right? Major Sorcery, that's a very important buff for anyone newer to the game, gives you 20% more spell damage, and probably your average dude is going to run anywhere between like 2 and 2.4k unbuffed spell damage. So I cast my Major Sorcery, and I'm normally gaining somewhere like 400, 500 spell damage from that skill or cast or buff or potion, whatever it is. So 500 spell damage is equivalent to about 5k and a bit Magicka. 400 spell damage is equivalent to 4k and a bit Magicka. So just times it by 10. And your average dude is going to be running like 4k Magicka. So if I'm getting 10% more on that, this passive is quite literally Major Sorcery for your max Magicka. Not only that, but increasing your max Magicka is going to increase your shield size. So very often, especially light armor, you're going to want to run a damage shield on a class. And almost every time, these damage shields will scale on your max Magicka. The more max Magicka, the bigger the shield. So increasing your max Magicka is a super strong passive. Next one is Spell Resistance. Very underestimated passive. Very few people realize this. They consider it a joke passive. It is definitely not. It's a very good passive. 4k spell resist is nearly as much as Major Ward, Major Resistance, all of those are going to give. It is a lot of resistances. Hopefully people will start to pay attention to this after this video, but do consider this. Fight someone who is using a Breton, fight someone who's using a High Elf who are exactly the same skill level. As a Magicka class, I guarantee you will feel the spell resistance big time. It's very tanky and it's completely free of charge. You don't do anything to gain that tankiness. It's very good. Final one is Magicka Mastery. This reduces the cost of your skills by 3%. A lot of people underestimate this. There are 5-piece set bonuses such as Seducer, which would decrease your skill cost by 8%, or Worm, which would decrease it by 4% for a whole group. The reality is that this is free of charge, and 3% reduced cost is something you really notice, especially in heavy armor builds. That's quite a lot of reduction, honestly, and it's very, very unseen by many people. It's very powerful. Imagine its skill costs 4k, which is very common. Shields will cost that, so for a Magicka Sorcerer, it's very good. Heavy armor builds, it's going to be costing that and the rest in Magicka. Very good for those. It's saving you 120 plus Magicka per cast there, 3% of 4k. Maybe more, maybe less, but often more. It's a great passive. It's very underestimated, and yeah, so this race shines especially on heavy armor or jeweled Magicka classes, or in my opinion, Magicka Sorcerer, especially where they're shield stacking a lot. Okay, so race number 2, and so far I've gone through the DC ones. So these 3 are the DC races. This is the Orc, and this is a very popular choice, especially in Stamina Sorcerers. Though I believe you may also see some Stamina Templars having success in this race as well, and I'll sort of explain why in a sec. So this race is generically pretty tanky and very high damage Stamina class. It's very strong for PvP. PvE wise, you're not really going to see the benefit of this as much as other stamina classes, especially Khajiit and Redguard, but PvP wise, it's definitely a strong choice. So first passive, again, your generic fairly useless one, heavy armor skill, passive and crafting inspiration. I'm just going to skip that. It doesn't matter much for any sort of combat point of view. Again, if you're a new player, maybe you want to level up faster, but it's not a huge difference to your class, so don't get too fussed about it. You can easily level that stuff up anyway. Increase your max health and max stamina by 6%. Very good passive. You're gaining max stamp for damage and sustain. You're gaining health for survivability. Pretty generic, perfect setup for your PvP point of view. Compare it to a Wood Elf, it's given about the same amount of stamp, but compare it to a Redguard, a bit less. However, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll get less damage, which I will show you in a sec, based on another passive. So it's definitely stronger than it looks at first. People will underestimate the Orc very often. I do think it's an extremely good race and super underestimated. Next one, increase your healing received by 5% and health recovery by 20%. Both of these very valuable on a stamina class in PvP. The thing is, stamina class normally runs a lot of heal over times, less burst heals. Why does that make healing received so good? It means your heal over times are going to be a lot stronger, and your health recovery as well is then going to be ticking alongside your healing received. Now, especially if you're going to run a set like Troll King, which can buff your health recovery up to anywhere like 3k plus, a set like this, a skill like this can really benefit your health recovery tremendously. 20% of that is giving you another 600 recovery in health. That's insane. That's so much recovery. It makes you very tanky, hard to kill. And your base healing receive is going to increase the survivability through skills such as Vigor, Rally, Dark Deal perhaps, all sorts of things in there. Very strong passive, very underestimated alongside the Breton. Very underestimated passive, this one. Final one, which is where it really shines for Stamplars and Stamsorks, is Swift Warrior. So increase your damage done with melee attacks by 4%. Anyone can see that that's a nice passive. 4% more melee damage, great. Get stuck in and personal if that's your preference. Definitely a good race choice for you. 4% damage is a good chunk of damage. That's a decent amount there. Definitely worth having. And it's not going to affect your base stats either. It's just going to increase your raw damage stats on your tooltip. So it's really nice for sort of close personal gameplay. It helps a lot with that, especially in a Stamsork again, where you're really going to often be close in and aggressive. But this is the passive that really is interesting. Reduce the cost of sprint by 12%, and more importantly, increase the movement speed bonus of sprint by 10%. So any class where you can get a mix about high mobility, it's a very interesting race. Why Templar and Sorcerer especially? Sorcerer has minor speed buff already and can get major speed buff easily. That means you can stack this speed buff in as well. When you're sprinting, you can instantly be rocked in across the map. You really are going to be fast in this class. It makes you humongously mobile, and that is very powerful in PvP. You can get to line of sight. You can sort of adjust your position in a fight, and that's a very valuable asset. Trust me on this as an advanced player. Movement is very important in the game, and this really helps your movement as a stamina class. As a Stamplar, although you don't have those movement buffs, you do have a skill called Purify, which can obviously purify negative effects from you, and that will include snares. That means that when you purify a snare, you are no longer going to be reduced in movement speed, so your sprint is already going to be generically faster if you are snared. What that means is you can instantly apply this buff by sprinting, and you're just going to get that bit more mobility, and you're still getting all that damage, etc. I think it's still a very good race choice for Stamplar. A lot of people disagree, but I can definitely see it happening. So good race, Very underestimated, but PvP race. Okay, so our next race is probably one of your bread and butters for stamina. This is the Red Guard, the final race for the DC. This is going to be one of your most popular stamina choices since the beginning of time, pretty much. So this has had a lot of nerfs during the Morrowind patch, and does that stop it being a really, really popular choice for both PvE-ish and PvP? Definitely yes. Certainly not. It's still a very, very good stamina race, a lot of regen, and very, very, very powerful race. So, our first passive, obviously fairly useless, though not entirely, I suppose. I mean, it's not the best, obviously, to have food passive, but hey, it's better than some of the other shit you see, so you can't complain, and yeah, it's giving you a tiny benefit, I suppose. But more importantly, we're gaining 9% stamina recovery. That is a lot of stamina recovery. Now, there are races with more than that, such as the Wood Elf, which will give you quite a decent chunk of recovery. I believe it's 20% plus, but we'll get to that in the future. And even then, it's giving a lot of stamina recovery when you consider the rest of the passives in conjunction. So, next passive is 10% max stamina. 10% max stamina, very like the Breton that we discussed before. Again, just giving us max resources. It's going to increase our healing, increase survivability, all of the good stuff, as well as giving us that larger resource pool just to sustain with. And then you've got the stranger one, Adrenaline Rush, and this is the passive that's been changed and nerfed and buffed all over the place multiple times. And a lot of people are saying the race is dead because of this change, but I want to quickly do the maths for you. 792 divided by 5 times 2. That will give you the regen, since regen is every 2 seconds, and that gives you 316.8. That's still a lot of regen, 316.8. So if we compare this to the Wood Elf real fast, Wood Elf gets about 10%, 11% or whatever more stamina recovery. So unless you've got 3k plus base stamina recovery, the Red Guard is still more sustained than the Wood Elf in most situations. So the Red Guard is still a very, very well sustained race with good damage, more damage than most other stam races. And yeah, it's still a very, very good race for stamina, one of your top choices for sure. Okay, so our next race is going to be from the AD Alliance, and this is one of your more popular choices for a Magicka race. You do see this very often used, and I'm not going to lie, it's one of the stronger PvP and PvE mixed races, so it kind of does everything that you really need in the game. It's going to be strong for damage, it's got good sustain, it's just a generically really strong race for Magicka. And that is the High Elf. So first passive, again, your bullshit nonsense, increase experience gain by 1%, destro staff leveling, ignore that one. But then we go into magic recovery, very, very similar to the Red Guard here. It's sort of your Red Guard equivalent, to be honest. It's giving you 9% magic recovery there, and as well as that 10% max magicka. So pretty much the same as a Red Guard. It's the same amount as magicka as a Breton. When I'm saying Red Guard, by the way, I'm obviously comparing stamina to magicka here, not the same. I should point out, this is a magicka race. It's a race that shines especially well, though, with destro staffs. So this one increases your flame, frost, and shock damage by 4%. So if your base damage is coming from crushing shock, it can work out really good since you're using all elements. It doesn't have to be, of course, with destro. Some general magic skills will scale off fire damage especially, though with the Warden we also have some frost damage coming in. So High Elf may shine there. But I don't have to say much about this race other than if you want a race that works all the time with something magicka, High Elf is your race choice, basically. Especially in light armor, it's giving you a good amount of recovery, a good amount of max magicka to generate damage, and bonus damage for any elemental trait damage. So any time where you're going to use elemental based damage, apart from a magicka DK, I can't stress that enough, I'll get onto that again in a bit, I really like a different race for that. It's your go-to race. It's a great race, and it does everything, basically. It's a perfect race for magicka. But again, I still often prefer the Breton just because of that spell resist and reduced cost. It's just my playstyle. For many people, this is going to be the go-to race for a magicka class. Alright, so the next race we've got is one of my favourites for the Stamina Nightblade. I really, really like this race, especially on Nightblade. Now, that doesn't obviously mean that it's the race that you have to use personally for a Stamina Nightblade. Sometimes Khajiit is very good, sometimes Red Guard is very good. I guarantee there's people out there will make Orc work. It's just my preference, but I really, really like it here. And that is the Wood Elf. So, first thing first, A non-useless passage. Decrease your full damage by 10%. Honestly, like when you're kiting around open world, that's actually not a bad passive. You'd be surprised how often that 10% can really help you out. Imagine jumping out of a tower, you'd normally take a bit of damage. I genuinely think that saved me 100 plus times through the day. So it's not actually a useless passive, unlike most of them. The bow experience, again, irrelevant. It's going to save you, I don't know, 30 minutes of time during your entire grind. But the saving on your full damage is actually not bad at all. So, stamina recovery, 21%. So much stamina recovery. And this shines if you're playing a high stamina recovery build. Very, very good recovery in here indeed. So if you're stacking high recovery, you're going to get a massive amount of gain from this percentage. Let's imagine, such as my bone pipe build, which you can see that's called Untouchable on my YouTube channel if you are interested. I would be stacking stam recovery on there up to 4k. I'm getting 21% on that. That is going to give me 800 plus more recovery, 840 to be precise. That's so much recovery. A huge gain from that passive. So it's a really, really handy passive for sustain. And it's especially useful in times where you're going to have to roll dodge a lot, which is why I particularly value it on a Stamina Nightblade, because generally you have poor healing on a Stamina Nightblade, but your survivability comes from your dodging, your cloaking, and that sort of stuff. Cloak is obviously a skill that makes you invisible, by the way, if you don't know that, of course. But roll dodging is getting more and more expensive. There's no real way to reduce that, so increasing your recovery to compensate is a very good way around it. Next one, resist affliction. This gives you max stamina by 6%, which is not terrible. It's going to be about the same as the orc, though obviously you're not getting the health. And you're getting this poison and disease resist by 1,485. That's not that great. I mean, it's a bit whatever. It's not terrible. I mean, if someone's using like a disease or poison glyph, it can help a little bit, but it's not very common damage. I suppose poison is, from like stamina decay point of view, you can get some damage from there. But generally speaking, that bit of the passive is a bit irrelevant. The max stam, however, is great. It's obviously less than the red guard, but it's still a decent chunk. 6% is really not bad. You do notice that a lot in both damage and sustain aspect, and it's very strong. Definitely one to look out for. But the big reason I like it on a Stam Nightblade is this next passive, which is it reduces your detection radius and stealth by 3%. Irrelevant. I don't really see that much. But increase your damage done while in stealth by 10%, and that includes cloak. So Nightblades have a skill called Cloak, if you have seen my class guide, that can make you invisible. When you're invisible, you're then going to get the benefit from the Stealthy passive, meaning whatever you do from your Cloak here is going to be buffed by Stealthy passive, which means you're going to get more damage from stealth automatically for just doing your general survival routine. What that means is you've got good survivability, but you're still generating damage from that survivability, and so from a Stamina Nightblade point of view, I really like it. It's possible next patch, even though the Stealthy passive will be useless, or nearly useless, that you might start seeing some Wood Elf DKs, Sorks, Templars, whatever it is, in PvP, Wardens as well, if they're stacking high recovery, because with the changes to the champion point system and stuff like that coming in the next patch, nothing relevant for new players, by the way, don't worry about that, but basically speaking, people will generally stack a lot more recovery, more likely than not, and so they might find more benefit from this than the Red Guard. I would doubt that in most builds, but it's possible, and so at that point Wood Elf might be the better race for sustain, even though it's getting you less damage. But again, generally speaking, it is a Stamina Nightblade thing. And I should point out this is a PvP race for sure. This is not something you're really going to see in PvE much. Much better off with Khajiit and Wood Elf. Khajiit and Red Guard, sorry. But it does the job, you know, it's really not bad, and it's a very good race for PvP Stam Nightblade in my opinion. So, yeah, I like this one a lot. Okay, so final race for the AD now. This is one that particularly shines in PvE, though there are people out there can make it shine in PvP as well. It does have some cool passives in there, especially based on crit chance. Crit chance very useful for your healing especially, I do have to say. But why is this class so cool? It looks awesome. It's a very cool design, pretty unique. So for that reason, it's automatically better in your books. It's definitely a stamina class. You're not going to play this on Magicka, but again, maybe you're sort of a roleplay guy, and you do like it. I don't know, but generally speaking, it's going to be a stamina class, more PvE than PvP. So first passive, health recovery and stam recovery. So that stam recovery and health recovery is very, very similar to everything that we see in the Orc passive. We obviously have stam recovery. Sorry, we don't have stam recovery there. We obviously have the health recovery, exactly the same, 20%. That increases your survivability through your health recovery, especially with sets like Troll King. It can amp up sets like that by a lot, which means that you're going to get a lot of health recovery, very, very strong survivability without even casting anything. And then stamina recovery is going to help your general sustain, dodging, etc. So for general survivability, it's great. It's a very, very strong set, and yeah, it's a nice set, a nice stat for sure. Next one is going to be reduce your detection bias for stealth, very like the Wood Elf, not too relevant, but it also increase your damage done while in stealth by 10%, so exactly the same as Wood Elf, increasing the damage done. And yeah, it's a great passive to have from a stealth point of view, so like a Nightblade, it can shine there. It's a great passive, doing a lot of damage from your stealth, and it can benefit a lot, especially from a gank play style, so again, that's your sort of stam Nightblade. Yeah, it's a great passive. But the last one is where it really shines in PvE especially, and can also help in PvP. Increase your weapon critical by 8%. What that's going to do is it's going to increase your crit chance located by here. Weapon critical by here. And that is going to help your survivability tremendously in healing. If you can crit your heal, you're going to get 50% more healing. And believe me, it's so notable, especially on a Nightblade where healing is poor. It really helps your survivability, because it's going to be a real nightmare to kill if they are very, very well built. And it's very strong class for PvP in that sort of sense. Survivability wise, they're very underestimated. However, in PvE, it is extremely good. It's giving you a lot of crit to increase your chance to put out crits and increase your base damage. Very good passive, super powerful, and a huge benefit in PvE especially. Okay, moving on to the final alliances races now, and we're going to start off with definitely the most underrated race in the game. So a lot of people look at what this is, the Argonian, as a complete joke race, but the reality is that it actually is really not that terrible, and it definitely has its place in some aspects of the game. Places you're particularly going to see this race, very tanky stamina classes, and more often than not a Magicka Templar, though also when the Warden release comes, I would not be surprised if you see some on there as well, just because some of the passives pair very well with how the class plays. So, starting with the sort of Troll passive, increase your swim speed by 50%. Amusingly, compared to the others, it's really not that bad. A lot of people joke about that passive, saying how useless it is, but it's in the sort of passive that I would classify as a waste of time for most classes anyway, so really, it does have a tiny use sometimes. Imagine you're in Cyrodiil, you've got to cross a bridge, and a lot of people are on there, you jump off, you need to swim before you get rooted. Never know, it might come in handy. Some of the other stuff is just never going to be handy. Obviously, it's a minority, but it's not a complete waste of time. And then XP on resto stuff, no one cares about that. So, first passive is really very good. And it's especially good on a Dragon Knight. And that sounds strange, but I'll explain why. So, increase your max Magicka by 3%. Why is that a good passive? Simple, really. It's giving you increased Magicka. It's obviously not that much. When we compare it to 10% of High Elf or Breton, it is a minority resource. But this second half of the passive, when you drink a potion, you restore 4, 6, 20 health, Magicka, and stamina. So potions have a natural cooldown of 45 seconds. When we divide our 4, 6, 20 by that, and then times it by 2, since regen is every 2 seconds, we get a regen worth of 205.3 for stamina, Magicka, and health. So that's all 3 of those. The reason that's especially good on a DK is DK is one class where in particular you're going to make use of all of your resource pools. And there are other classes you can do that for sure, but it does shine a lot on especially a stam DK. Less so a Magicka, because Magicka gets benefit from one particular race that I have not covered yet. As I said, there's a very specialised race for that one. But it can work on almost anything where you are blocking a lot. It's basically a blocking stamina passive, so it's really not bad on that front. It's giving you an okay amount of Magicka back. The health, not so relevant, but the Magicka and stamina pretty damn useful. Next one is Argonian Resistance. 9% health. That's a decent chunk. It's really not bad. And then Poison and Disease Resistance. Well, whatever. I mean, it's 1,500. It's not going to change much. Again, you're going to be slightly tankier against the stam decay because of the poison resist. Is it going to change the world? Probably not, but it does help a little bit, I suppose. I mean, you might as well have it if nothing else, right? Last but not least is the reason that it shines so well on stamina classes, and that is quick to mend. Increase your healing done and healing received by 5%. Now your healing done will also work on yourself. Healing received obviously works on yourself. So essentially, for yourself as a solo player, or for yourself healing yourself at least, you are gaining 10% total healing from having this passive. Now let me put it this way, that is a lot of healing when you are stacking things like Vigor, Rally Ticks, or playing Magicka, Rapid Regen, Purified Dot, this, that and the other, and then your major heals such as your Rally Burst, Breath of Life. These are all common heal skills, by the way. If you are a newer player, these are sort of your bread and butter heal skills for Stamina and Magicka. When you got all of those ticking, those massive heals flying off, lots of heal over times flying off, you really start to reap the benefit of this passive, and it's really good for building tanky. Now obviously it's not a race that you're going with to build for damage, but if you want to be tanky as hell, it's a great race, and it does shine a lot. Also, because of that very good healing, it does help in sort of group Templars. You'll be naturally a bit tankier because of some of these passives, especially resourceful. But then you also got this really amplified healing. So it's a cool race for sure. Very underestimated in my opinion. I'm not saying it's the best in the world. It does have niche slots though, and it's definitely not a waste of time. Next on the menu is probably one of your tankier stam races. I don't think, don't quote me on this, but I don't think people are really using this in PvE at all. It's a pretty niche race. I'm not going to lie, it's not one I've ever found use of. I do know some people who use this to great effect, and this is a very tanky stamina race. So where you'd normally see this in something where you really want to get stuck in, but be able to mitigate a lot of damage free of charge. And for that reason play a high offense but high tanky build. So getting stuck in with high offense but not necessarily putting out huge damage in each hit, but just keeping those hits rolling out whilst you are not taking too much heat. So this is the Nord obviously. First race, duration of drinks. I mean, it's nice for grinding I suppose. You get increased duration on your XP, but again, doesn't matter much. So max stamina 6% and health recovery 20%. We're seeing pretty similar to the Orc on that one. It's got that health recovery from one of the other passives and the stamina for your max resources. Both are good. The health recovery obviously only really that important if you're using a health recovery set though. So something like Troll King again pairs very well with this race because you are obviously getting that huge healing gain on your health recovery. Your base health recovery is normally pretty low, so if you aren't using a health recovery set, it's not the best passive, but obviously you're still getting the stamina, so I guess it's kind of free of charge. Next one is Resist Frost, so you increase your max health. This is something you don't see very often in the races. Max health obviously making you, lo and behold, tankier. Like I said, it's going to help your survivability quite a bit. It's going to mean you have to shield less if you're Magicka. Obviously you're not going to play Magicka as this race. Or in the case of stamina, you're going to have a little more time to put up things like Vigor, Rally, all of the sort of stamina heals that you'll learn about in the game in the future. Cold resist, not currently that applicable. I'll be honest with you, there's really not that much cold damage in the game, but do consider that it is giving you cold resist, which the Warden will use. So perhaps you'll see a little bit more benefit of this against the Warden. I don't know, I don't think it's going to be like a turning factor in a fight, that cold passive, to be honest, but I guess you wait and see, and maybe it'll be useful against some Warden builds, I don't know. Last but not least is one of the cool tanky passives. This is Rugged. Reduce your damage taken by 6%. So that's just a generic damage mitigation. And actually that's pretty strong. There are 5-piece set bonuses in this game that would mitigate by 8%. So 6% is really quite a big damage reduction. And certainly not something to mess about with. And this is the sort of reason you can get stuck in a personal, because you're taking a lot less damage. You can get in there, you can hit them. And then you could sort of leave that heal a little later than other classes just because you've got that survivability waiting. And that can help your offense a little bit. The problem is you don't have many of those damaging passives, just the 6% stam. So it's a balance between those. And it's not a race for me, but perhaps someone wants to build tankier and then maybe it's not a bad race for you, I suppose. Last but not least of the main races, this is what I call the walking Magicka Dragon Knight race. It really is, but you do also see this a lot in many PvE builds It's a pretty popular choice for PvE, especially because of this final passive here. We'll get onto that in a sec. And it's just an all-round decent damaging class in PvE, especially when running fire sort of stuff, and that is the Dark Elf. So, why is the Dark Elf so damn strong on a Dragon Knight? We'll ignore this one. Reduce your damage taken from environmental lava. Come on. I don't know what that is. Maybe in Battlegrounds you'll see some lava, but not really relevant, let's be honest here. However, Dynamic, giving you Magicka and Stamina, 6% in both. Very, very nice. It's giving you a pool to generate your damage from as a Magicka Dragon Knight, and a pool to generate your tank ability from through blocking. So you've got a lot of stamina to block with. It's going to benefit your blocking in general. That's going to mean that you have increased resources. Frankly, it does what it says, and both those resources are really important there. Obviously, from Magicka point of view in PvE, only the Magicka matters. It is, by the way, a Magicka class. It is not a stamina class despite that stamina. You won't ever see it on stamina good players, I suppose. But if you like the look of it, why not? I mean, it's up to you, I guess. So the Magicka there is really, really good for damage, but especially when you look at the next passive, which gives you even more. So you're getting 9% max Magicka. Basically the same as your Breton and High Elf, which are giving you 10%, just that 1% less. But we'll get how we get more damage than that in a sec. But we're also getting some Flame Resist there. Not terrible. That's going to protect you from other Dragon Knights and that sort of stuff. It's going to protect you for skills such as Fire Heavy Attacks, Crushing Shock, anything flame based, Flame Blockade. A lot of the destruction stuff skills are fire based, so well, if you're running a fire stuff, of course. It's really not a bad resistance. Pretty similar to the Nord. We're getting 2079, but you'll see a lot more fire than ice open world, so it's pretty helpful there. And of course that Magicka, again, amplifying our damage, amplifying our sustain. However, this is the big reason why it's so good on a Dragon Knight. Destructive Ancestry. Increase your flame damage by 7%. So Magicka Dragon Knight is built around fire damage. If your fire damage is higher, that's better. So it's really that simple. It's just such a good race for a Dragon Knight. It builds all of the stats that you need and then amplifies your damage by 7%. It works so damn well on the Magicka Dragon Knight. I think Magicka Dragon Knight is the one class / race combo where you just gotta be the right race. Dark Elf is just so dominant in terms of a race. And I'm not saying you can't play a High Elf. I'm not saying you can't play a Breton. I'm not saying if you want you can't play an Argonian, a Khajiit, whatever. But if I was to take my personal choice here, 10 times out of 10 I would go for this one here. Yeah, I think it's really strong, to be honest. So I would go for this bad boy here. I think Dark Elf is fantastic there. And again, from PvE point of view, most builds out there run Dark Elf. If you're after a specific advanced end PvE build, I would definitely suggest checking the person's videos. Some builds may gain slightly from other races, but generally speaking, Dark Elf is going to be one of your stronger PvE choices, and it kind of comes down to that. So very strong race, one of my personal faves, and definitely worth getting at least one character with this, because Magicka Dragon Knight is seriously fun. Not to sell my class or anything, but got to do it. The passive gold gain, 1 shield XP, it's both irrelevant. Max health by 12%, so getting a lot of health there, and also max stam by 10%. So both of those are building you pretty tanky, and that's why I could imagine it being used in something fairly tanky. You're getting a lot of stamina for blockability and a lot of health for survivability. Does that mean it's going to be the best? I don't know. I've never seen PvE tanking. Like I said before, it's not something I know much about. I'm more of a DPS and PvP type of guy in terms of PvE and PvP. So I'm not too knowledgeable about that stuff, but I do believe you would see it there more than anything else. I suppose I can see its usefulness there. PvP wise, I'm not so sure. I don't think you're going to see it too often. But second one, your melee attacks have a 10% chance to restore 6% of your max health. So that's also going to help your survivability. It's going to give you a heal over time. You are always going to be weaving at least a heavy attack in there here and there, even if you're playing really blocky. I'm sure you get some light attacks in there in a normal fight and that sort of stuff. So that's my general idea about tanking. But again, not a race I know much about. And that is unfortunately the last race. So I hope that I've covered everything appropriately for you. I hope that you have a more widened understanding about what races do what. Obviously, some of you might not even know the passives of some classes, and my general hope is to help you with that. Fuck. So, a final race now, and this is more of a PvE tankish race. This is the Imperial. So the reason this PvE tankish is the first two passives. We're going to ignore Diplomat. That does absolutely nothing here. They give us max health and max stamina. So we're gaining block ability, we're gaining survivability. Does everything you need in something tanky. Would I use it in PvP? I don't think so. There might be people out there who do. Personally, not for me. I mean, personally, this isn't a race that I really touch. Quick note, by the way, you have to have the Imperial version of the game to access this race. Just keep that in mind if you ever are interested in this race. You have to have the Imperial version. You have to buy that in your original package, or you can upgrade with crowns to that version. But just keep that in mind before you go rushing in expecting to be an Imperial. But again, not a race that I personally would go for anyway, but it's up to you, I suppose. Last but not least, your melee attacks have a 10% chance to restore 6% health, so that's giving us a heal over time through our damage. Sort of damage you're going to do, imagine your light attack weaving every time, 6%, you're probably averaging, I don't know, about 25k health maybe. So it's not a terrible heal, it's like 1,500 every light attack. That's pretty good, I mean, it's really not bad. So, no, 150, sorry, 1,500 be it if it was 100%, so it's pretty good. I mean, 150 heal over time isn't terrible. For something that's just coming free of charge, essentially going to light attack, weave and everything anyway. Is it going to be a massive factor in a fight? Of course not. It's not a game-changing thing, but it's not terrible. But yeah, not the sort of race that I go for personally. I don't really buy into this one, but up to you. I mean, maybe you can make it work. I'm pretty sure it's going to be good in PvE tanking, but again, not something I know too much about tank-wise. But anyway, that is the last race. I hope that this video has at least somewhat helped you understand how the racial passives work if you are a newer player, the sort of options you've got, the exact passives, because obviously you don't get a real thorough description of that at the start, and I hope that I can help with that. But as well as that, I hope that I've explained, not to an advanced level or anything, but at least to intermediate players or people who are a little newer to the game, on how to actually pick a race that suits your class. So that's something that a lot of people do a little wrong. They sort of jump in, they think this race sounds good, looks good or whatever, and don't entirely realise that race can have an influence on the way you play. So that's the sort of stuff that I hoped to get over in this video. But I think I covered everything. So if you've liked this video, if you found it productive, please subscribe to the channel. I very rarely ask people to do this, but I've been seeing a lot of growth recently on the channel. It's great to see. I really appreciate you guys enjoying the video. And yeah, if you've got any comments on what you'd like to see next, I want to keep these guides rolling out every day, every 2 days, free at a push. If you've got any particular guide that you want to push out, I have had requests for animation cancelling, class versus class specific fights, for example, like Nightblade against Sorc or whatever. Anything you want, bang it in the description below, put a comment of what you'd like to see next, and I will definitely make it. I will keep these rolling out, and I hope I can help you. But for the time being, peace. I do wish you the best of luck, and I hope that your classes work out.